back, my friends, and thank you so much for joining me yet again. We have what will hopefully turn out to be one of my best videos every single week. I'm going to be dropping this. It is all of my positional rankings, including tiers. We are talking defenses, kickers. I'm doing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends as well in this video. Now, I'm going to give you as much possible information as I can that's going to help us win our weeks here. But I also want to try to keep this a little shorter and concise. So if you guys have questions, or if there are players that I do not cover specifically you are wondering about, please drop those comments down below. The engagement is one of my favorite parts of making content for you guys. It's the reason I do this. I love to be able to go back and forth with you. By doing that together, we get better. That is what it is all about here at Relentless Press. Without any further ado, like, subscribe. That helps me out a ton. We're going for 1,000, and we are very, very close. By hitting the button, you can join us on the journey. We're gonna start with my defenses, and in tier 1 at the top, I have the Dallas Cowboys. They get the Jets this week. This defense, and I do not say, no, maybe I've never said this before, this defense this week could win you your week. They are at home. They get Zach Wilson at the helm for the Jets. Micah Parsons is about to feast. Should be a huge game for Dallas. At 2 is the 49ers. They get the Rams. On to my second tier, I have the Saints at Carolina at the top here. They just terrorized Ryan Tannehill, forced him into 3 picks. They also racked up 3 sacks. And after how Bryce Young looked in week 1, I think he likely struggles against this squad. The Broncos, Giants, and Bills are next. They round out the tier. And in tier number 3, I have the New York Jets against Dallas in that same game. The matchup may not be great after what we saw from Dallas in week 1, but Dak looked less than stellar in that game, and New York should be able to control the ground game a little bit, and I think that will force the Cowboys into some issues in the passing game. Also, the Jets have playmakers at every single level, and they just forced Josh Allen to turn the ball over 4 times, so I think they will be fine. Commanders and Browns are up next, and rounding out my top 10 at the top of tier 4, I have the Baltimore Ravens. The Colts against the Texans are in my 12th spot. They posted a top 10 showing last week against the Jaguars. We know that they are an awesome offense, so it was an impressive debut nonetheless for them. I think they are able to keep the momentum going against a young Texans team that lacks bite in their offensive approach. In tier 5, I have the Bucks and the Steelers. These are 2 teams that, unless you're in deeper leagues, you're probably not going to want to start, but I do think they offer some upside. Pittsburgh in particular, they got railroaded last week against the 49ers. I get that, but they still were able to force 3 sacks. So if they can keep Deshaun Watson a little bit uncomfortable for most of the game, they will be able to post a potential top 10 performance for you. Packers and Panthers and my defense options for week number 2. Into my kickers now. In tier 1, Tyler Bass. Great option. He hit from 30, 40, and 50 yards last week. Of course, he got that little bit of a lucky bounce with the doink, but we take him. Justin Tucker is next at 2, and Jake Moody is my 3rd ranked kicker. I think he is due for a lot of opportunities against the Rams this week. Harrison Butker in what should be a shootout against the Jaguars. I think both him and Brandon McManus get plenty of work. To round out my top 10, and at the bottom of tier 3, I have Riley Patterson. I think he bounces back after only getting extra point try opportunities in week 1. Seattle could not slow the lowly Rams last week. Detroit's offense is just warming up, so Patterson is going to get a couple kicks here against the Hawks. Tier 4 goes Evan McPherson, Daniel Carlson, and I have Matt Gay way up here because I just like what the Colts are doing with Anthony Richardson, and I don't believe in the Texans. My 5th and final tier has Brandon Aubrey against the Jets, and then Anders Carlson against Atlanta. He crushed a 52-yarder in week 1 for the Pack. I think Green Bay puts Atlanta's defense to the test a little bit. They didn't struggle last week. I think they do a little here, and Carlson probably gets a shot. Now into my quarterbacks, we start with Josh Allen. He is my #1 quarterback this week, even though he's coming off of a brutal performance. He posted a passer rating below 65 for just the 4th time in his career, seemingly trying to force it against the Jets. But the Raiders allowed the 3rd highest adjusted completion rate in week 1. That's going to help Allen get back on track. I do not expect him to make us hurt as owners in back-to-back weeks. 2 is Patrick Mahomes. I think it is going to be a shootout in Jacksonville, and that is why I have Trevor Lawrence up next at 3 at the top of tier 2. This guy was 4th in passing grade in week 1. I think Lawrence explodes against a Chiefs defense that allowed the 3rd most points per game from this position in fantasy last year. At 4 is Justin Herbert. He is going to light up a Titans defense that just allowed the 5th most passing yards in the league to Derek Carr. This is the same Tennessee defense that allowed the most passing yards last year and the 4th highest adjusted completion rate. It's going to be bombs away for Herbert in this game. Now, I also believe that the run-heavy scheme that they implemented in week 1 against the Dolphins is going to change a little bit because of Austin Eckler's ankle injury. Even if Eckler plays, they probably move to the pass a little bit more. I think the volume plus the matchup here leads to a huge effort from Herbie. Lamar Jackson rounds out my top 5 against Cincinnati. And at the top of tier 3, I am still believing in Justin Fields. He cannot be blamed entirely, at least, for what happened last week. I know it was a debacle, I know it wasn't good, but he is going to move forward from it. If the play calling tightens up a little bit and they give Fields some help, maybe play to his strengths a little bit more often, then there is a bounce back game right here waiting to happen. The Bucs allowed the 5th most yards per attempt while being massacred by Kirk Cousins last week, so I believe Fields takes advantage of that. At 7 is last week's QB1 overall, Tua Tagovailoa. The matchup is not great, but I think he is just fine against the Patriots. Speaking of being just fine, at 8 is Joe Burrow. He is gonna bounce back here against a horrible Ravens secondary. Do not panic, start him with confidence. At the top of tier number 4, Anthony Richardson sits. He got off to an incredible start last week as the QB4 overall in his first pro game. Indy's neutral pace and passing rate was also higher than anticipated. They were both top 12 in the NFL. That means that Richie Rich is going to have plenty of opportunities weekly. We already know that the guy can run. He posted 10 carries and 40 yards with a score, and he only had 1 designed run in week number 1. It was all scrambling. That means he is a locked and loaded quarterback 1 for us. Jared Goff is going to round out my top 10 this week. He was top 10 in passing grade and in yards per attempt last week. So even though the statistics didn't really follow in that matchup with Kansas City, I believe that they popped for him here. The Seahawks allowed the 3rd most passing yards and also the 4th most yards per attempt, and that was against the Rams, who did not have Cooper Kupp. They also couldn't get any pressure last week. They were the 2nd worst team in the league at it. Time for Jared Goff against a poor secondary. He's got Amon-Ra, who's already looking like he is on fire. Sam Laporta stepped up, and we only are beginning to get a glimpse of Jahmyr Gibbs. All that means that Goff is in for a big day. To tier number 5, at the top of it, I have a bounce back game from Daniel Jones. He will rebound against Arizona. They are susceptible to mobile quarterbacks. So even though his passing numbers still might not be pretty, this week he is going to make up for it on the ground. He does not have to worry about Micah Parsons trying to eat him alive. And Jones ran for over 700 yards last year, so we know he brings upside with that. Geno Smith is my last quarterback 1 with some hesitancy. I want to keep believing and keep the faith in him because he has awesome weapons, but Seattle did look horrible last week. I think there is a wide range of outcomes for Geno. Into tier 6, and at the top of it, my lucky number 13 is Brock Purdy. He could surprise again after being a top 10 performer last week against Pittsburgh. The doubts about his arm are gone now. We do not have to worry about it. Brock Purdy is the guy in San Francisco until he gets injured. Number 14 is Derek Carr, all the way up in this matchup on the road against Carolina. The Panthers allowed top 12 passing numbers as far as passer rating, adjusted completion rate, and passing scores last year. Susceptible across the board. We saw Carr be one of the only quarterbacks last week to throw for over 300 plus. You can have confidence in him in this start as well. I think he has top 12 upside for sure and a solid floor. Mac Jones, after a good performance last week, gets another good matchup at 15. He's here against the Dolphins. At 16, I have Deshaun Watson. Looked a little bit shaky, not great in week number 1. Of course, he did not have to do a whole lot as the Browns demolished the Bengals. I want to keep the faith here as well, but I am starting to get concerned just like I am with Geno. Dak Prescott is all the way down at 17. This guy was the quarterback 29 last week, and that was because, just like Watson, Dallas did not really have to do anything offensively. Unfortunately for Dak owners, that's probably going to be the case here as well. Zach Wilson is not going to put up a ton of points on Dallas's defense. They probably run the ball plenty in it. Now, I think the floor for Prescott is probably okay, but he has bust potential in this tough matchup with the Jets. Next up, at 18, I have Jordan Love. This guy finishes the overall quarterback 3 last week, which was incredible. He was one of only 3 quarterbacks that had 3 passing scores as well. Now, the metrics for him lie a little bit because he was only 20th in passing grade and 30th in adjusted completion rate. Both of those things are pretty concerning. We also know that Atlanta just demolished Bryce Young, and they were a top 5 team against the pass. So Love is going to face a real test this week against Atlanta. The Falcons were also top 5 in pressure rate, so I think that Love is going to take a step back after what he did to the Bears. At the top of Tier 7, I have Matthew Stafford. He balled out last week. He ranked 2nd in passing grade, 4th in yards per attempt, and 2nd in big time throw rate, and he did all of that without Cooper Kupp. So obviously he still has something left in the tank. My concern here obviously is San Francisco. Their defense is a different animal. I think we see a pretty major step back for Stafford. At this juncture, even after all the success we saw last week, Matty feels more like a matchup play for me. Sam Howell is the last of my top 20 quarterback. He has a legit shot at back-to-back QB1 performances. I know I can't believe that I said that either, but the weapons are there, and Denver did not look good against the pass last week. They also had the worst pressure rate in the league, so if Howell is on target this week against that Denver secondary, he could certainly shine. Russell Wilson is still trying to get back into every week starter territory. I have him here at 21 to round out my tier. In the 8th and final tier, I have Kenny Pickett, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, and CJ Stroud. None of these are very enticing, even in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues. Let's get into running backs. But before we do that, if you're enjoying the content, crush the like button for me. Make sure you subscribe as well and bump those notifications so you do not miss anything. My 1-1 at the running back position is Christian McCaffrey. He's all by himself in this tier because of the ankle injury Austin Eckler is dealing with. He is going to dominate the Rams in this game. LA had the league's 3rd lowest stuff rate, and they also allowed the highest yards before contact in week 1. So basically the Rams are not going to plug up holes, and they're also going to wait to hit run CMC. Yeah. Good luck with that monster game once again. In tier 2, at the top, I have Nick Chubb, and Saquon Barkley is next at 3. I know he was a letdown like the entire Giants offense was in week 1, but he should get plenty of volume and repay owners in this spot. At 4, I have Derrick Henry, but I think his range of outcomes is a little bit worse than we would like. I think he still has a decent game, but there are some concerning trends. Check out my buy-sell video if you want to know a little bit more about that. Rounding out my top 5, I have Bijan Robinson. He was the RB8 last week, and he only had 16 touches. This guy gained 3.1 yards after contact per attempt. Amazing metrics. He also had the highest receiving grade in the NFL, minimum of 3 attempts. I know that Tyler Allgeier's usage is concerning, and more importantly, very annoying. He had more carries as well as more red zone opportunities for the rookie, but that will change. Also, the Packers allowed the 5th highest explosive run rate in 2022. That is exactly what Bijan Robinson brings to the table. I think he leverages that for a big day against the Pack. I do have Austin Eckler up next at the top of tier number 3. He is a must start if he goes. Now, that being said, he is dealing with multiple things here, not only an ankle injury, but also the death of his agent. Either one of those things could prevent him from playing in week 2. Make sure that you confirm his status in your lineup before game time. My number 7 running back is Travis Etienne. He was the clear bell cow for the Jacksonville Jags in week number 1. 80% snap share, 23 total touches, over 100 yards of total offense. The guy scored a tutty, and he was the RB6 overall. He might struggle on the ground a bit in this game, but he is going to take advantage of Kansas City's poor defense against pass-catching backs. They allowed the 4th most receiving yards to the position. Etienne was also 3rd in route run rate per team, drop back right behind Run CMC, and when you're in the same category as him, you know you're doing something right. 15.6% target share last week as well. This guy is about to smash. At 8, way up there, I have Ramondre Stevenson. The numbers lied a little bit for him last week. I think he has an awesome game against the Miami defense that got plastered last week by the Chargers. At the top of tier 4, Tony Pollard sits. He is still a must start against an elite Jets front. This guy was the RB5 overall last week. He handled every team carry inside the 5-yard line, so the usage will be there as Dallas's defense continually sets that offense up with excellent field position. Josh Jacobs rounds out my top 10, 80% snap share in week 1 for him as well. He had 21 touches, unfortunately just 71 total yards, but the usage was there, and that volume is going to carry him as his offensive line cannot get any worse than it was last week. Even slight improvements there could mean big-time production for him. We just saw what Breece Hall did to this Buffalo defense, mauling them on multiple long runs. You cannot tell me that Jacobs isn't capable of that. Kenneth Walker headlines my next tier, 63% snap share for him in week 1, 16 touches for 67 total yards, so solid workhorse usage. He also had a 15% target share and a 137 elusive rating in week 1. All numbers that you want to see, especially with Zach Charbonnet maybe taking touches from him. That never materialized. Now, the Lions were solid against the run last week, but the sample for that is very small, and they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt after allowing the 6th most yards per carry last season. My last RB1 is Joe Mixon. Honestly, he could smash this ranking. 16 touches, 73 total yards against Cleveland. He had over a 50% route participation and a 16% target share as well. He's going to probably need that against a stout Ravens front. They allowed just 3.2 yards per carry last week. However, Mixon's usage in the passing game has gone up. It will continue to now that he is the lone guy there. In tier 6, I have a couple Detroit Lions. I start with David Montgomery at number 13, and his running mate Jahmyr Gibbs is right behind him at 14. Gibbs could be turned loose in this game after playing just 27% of the snaps against Kansas City. Make sure you check out my buy sell. I go off on Gibbs as well. If you have an opportunity at all, get this guy on your team. And unfortunately for Seattle, Gibbs does exactly what they are weak against. This team gave up the highest yards per reception and the 5th most receiving yards to backs last year. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to eat in that regard. At number 15, I have James Cook. He looked like the workhorse back for the Bills. He played in 60% of the snaps and brought in a 15% target share, 16 total touches, 63 yards against the Jets. this defense is not as potent. They are weak against pass catching backs. They allow the 4th most yards and 4th most receptions to backs last year. So Cook has legit RB1 upside if he can break one in the passing game or if he finds pay dirt. Joshua Kelly is next at 16. He had 16 carries, 91 yards, and a score with a 48% snap share last week. And if Austin Eckler can't go, I think he slides right in and starts for the Chargers. At number 17 is Najee Harris against Cleveland, and I have Dameon Pierce at 18 against Indy. Miles Sanders is at 19, and rounding out my top 20, I have Aaron Jones against Atlanta. He is still questionable with that hamstring injury, so ensure that he is active. He is a solid RB2 with RB1 upside if he plays. Tier 8 starts with Breece Hall. He only had a 31% snap share in week 1, but what did he do with it? 11 touches, 147 total yards. So if this guy is not fully 100% healthy, then imagine what he could do when he is. Unfortunately, we know that Wilson is going to hold him back. Damn you, Aaron Rodgers. My next man up is Jamal Williams. He is very volume dependent. Don't get it twisted. But he did have 20 total touches last week, and he has some touchdown upside here in a decent matchup. Rachaad White is my 23rd ranked back. He was the clear workhorse for Tampa Bay in week 1, 79% snap share, 19 touches. However, he did just have 49 total yards with it. So the usage is great, the production was not. Thankfully for him, Chicago offers a chance to level up. They allowed the highest explosive run rate and the 4th lowest stuff rate last year. If White does take advantage and he gets some work in the receiving game, he's got a chance at top 15 production. My last RB2 this week is Isaiah Pacheco, and James Conner rounds out my top 25. Tyler Algier is next at 26. He was RB4 last week because of those 2 touchdowns, 18 touches, 94 total yards against the Panthers. He was also 2nd in explosive run rate, and he was 4th in missed tackles forced per attempt in week 1. Say that 10 times fast. He did have just a 56% snap rate, not great, but he is going to produce as long as the touches come. And with those sparkling statistics and metrics, why would they not? We love this matchup, so I am in on Algier as an awesome flex play. At 27 is Javonte Williams. He is splitting that backfield right now with Samaje Perine. To tier 9, I start with Kyren Williams. He's my pick in the Rams backfield because he was the coach's pick last week. 65% snap share, 15 touches, 52 total yards, but more importantly, his usage both in the red zone and in routes run were far superior to Cam Akers, who had 22 carries for 29 yards. At 29, I have Gus Edwards, and Zach Moss rounds out my top 30. Down at 31, I have A.J. Dillon. This guy becomes a must-start RB2 if Aaron Jones sits out. Otherwise, I still think he has flex appeal in a decent matchup. Just talked a little bit about Samaje Perine. He is a decent option, splitting work. He had the same amount of snaps, totaled 78 yards on 12 touches in week 1. He was 5th in elusive rating as well, and that means he probably continues to pull a decent amount of opportunities. Into my 10th and final tier, just a couple running backs left. At 33, I have Brian Robinson Jr. He is the back to start if you're going to start a commander. 20 touches, 63 total yards is not great, and it does not inspire much excitement, but he did play in over 60% of the snaps for Washington. We know that Denver's front 7 is not going to be kind here, so B-Rob is merely a volume play as a flex option. At 34 is Raheem Mostert. I just don't like the matchup here. And at 35, I have Khalil Herbert. Dalvin Cook is at 36. And my final running back I'm looking at is Cam Akers. If you are considering starting Akers at this point, you are playing with fire. He played in just 35% of the snaps. Talked about the 22 carries for 29 yards. Even worse was his elusive rating, 38.2. That is an absolute joke. Quite unlike what he will be facing in that 49ers front 7. Maybe the volume is enough for him and he face plants into the end zone, but I doubt it. The odds are not in his favor, and I will pass on him if at all possible. quarterbacks, running backs, defenses, kickers. All out of the way, let's hop into my wide receivers. In Tier 1, I start with Tyreek Hill. On the road against New England, he racked up a ridiculous 6.1 yards per route run last week on his way to 200 plus. The matchup here isn't great, but it doesn't matter. You are smashed starting him. At 2, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Absolutely love him against Seattle. Stephon Diggs rounds out my top 3. He remains Allen's go-to alpha, a 33% target share and a 42.7% air yard share. So we saw 2 of every 3 looks and 2 of every 3 end zone targets in week 1 as well. He has an awesome matchup in the secondary to exploit this week against the Raiders. Tier 2 starts with Jamar Chase. Look, I know it wasn't great last week, but it wasn't good anywhere for the Bengals in week 1. He still had a 28% target share. He still had a 30% air yard share. He is going to be fine. I think it starts this week against a very banged up Ravens secondary. Exploding volcano potential for Jamar Chase. Rounding out my top 5 is Calvin Ridley. He had a monster week 1 and he started out hot early. 34.4% target share, nearly 50% air yard share. He made Christian Kirk completely disappear and picked up right where he left off. The corners that are going to be guarding him allow an average passer rating of 100 and nearly a 70% catch rate. He is Trevor Lawrence's alpha, and he's about to put on a big-time encore performance. At 6 and at the top of Tier 3, I have CeeDee Lamb. Now, I know we're concerned about the Jets, but he likely avoids Sauce Gardner for most of the day. He lined up in the slot 76% of his plays in week 1, and the Jets just play their sides of the field. He is not going to be followed. Lamb accounted for almost 55% of Dallas's receiving yardage. He also had a 3.85 yards per route run against the Giants. Both of those numbers are eye-popping. We fire him up as usual. Devontae Adams is next. He's at 7. Biggest thing here is that Jacoby Myers is doubtful against the Bills. That means that Adams should see a massive amount of volume. Also, the Raiders are likely to trail often and be playing catch-up here, so Devontae has incredible upside in week number 2. At Tier 4 to start is Chris Olave, 3.73 yards per route run against the Titans. Absolutely dominated. He will do so again against Carolina. Keenan Allen rounds out my top 10. He remains locked into lineups after racking up that 27% target share and 41% air yard share as the alpha in LA. He has top 5 upside this week in the slot against Roger McCreary. That dude's allowed an average of 110 passer rating in his career. DK Metcalf is at 11 in the bottom of this tier, and starting Tier 5, my last wide receiver 1 is T. Higgins. I highlighted him in my buy-sell video. Go get him if you can. He is going to be fine. Deebo Samuel is just outside my wide receiver 1s at 13. He should get his turn this week against the Rams. Los Angeles is a zone-running defense. They do it at a very high rate. And Deebs was the easy wide receiver 1 for the 49ers last year when they were facing it. I think Samuel could post top 5 numbers for us this week. At 14 and at the top of Tier 6 is Amari Cooper. He was the Browns' weapon just like Deebo against the zone last year, and Pitt ran zone on 50% of their snaps in week 1. I think Cooper bounces back after not being needed in that week 1 blowout win against the Bengals. DJ Moore did not get a lot of usage in week 1, and they heard about it, so I think that changes. I like him as a top 15 play. DeAndre Hopkins is here at 16. He is currently dealing with an ankle injury, but if he goes for Tennessee, he should go for you. Do not be fooled by his 7 catch and only 65 yard stat line. He had a monster 38% target share. He had a 46% air yard share as well, and this was a pitiful effort from Ryan Tannehill. If he can turn it around any amount, then Nuke is going to be just fine, and I think that he will. Brandon Ayuk travels to LA. I have him at 17, and at 18 and 19 back-to-back are the Tampa brothers, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Michael Pittman Jr. rounds out my top 20. I liked him last week and he hit for us. He got alpha usage in that week 1 win. He almost racked up 100 yards and he also scored. He had a nearly 30% target share and air yard share last week. If that carries over against Houston, he is in for a big day. At 21 and at the top of tier 7, I have Tyler Lockett, and Zay Flowers makes his arrival in my top 25. He is up next at 22. He burst onto the scene with a jaw-dropping 45.5% target share, and he also churned out nearly 3 yards per route run. It's clear that Lamar Jackson trusts him. He is likely to see double-digit targets again in this massive AFC North clash. Mike Williams is at 23. We love the matchup, and rounding out my wide receiver 2s, I have Gabe Davis. Christian Kirk is at 25. I expect a bounce back from him in this game because I think a lot of points are going to be needed to score against Kansas City. Puka Nacua is here at 26. He gets San Francisco, posted a Cooper Kupp-like 40% target share in the opening game. He is going to try to continue to build on his legend in this tough matchup. The volume alone, I think, makes him flex-worthy. He had 15 targets last week. We saw that Matthew Stafford will feed him. At the top of tier 8, falling down my rankings, so unfortunately, is Garrett Wilson. This guy cannot remain in wide receiver 2 territory after what we witnessed at the quarterback position in New York last week. Not against this defense especially. I think Wilson's talent is going to help him remain relevant here and there, but until his surroundings change, he is going to be a very hard person to start with confidence. I think he has shaky flex appeal, but tons of bust potential. 28 up next is Jahan Dotson. He is the commander you want in the passing game. With Scary Terry likely being shadowed by Patrick Surtain, it is going to be Dotson who has plenty of chances to take advantage of plus matchups. Cortland Sutton is at 29, and my last player in my top 30 is Nico Collins. I think he could be a sneaky good flex play this week. After he broke out in week 1, he had 11 targets and he also turned in a 2.42 yards per route run. You love both of those numbers, especially for a guy as young with that connection with CJ Stroud. He seems to be the preferred option for Stroud. You love to see that. And he had 64% air yard share against the Ravens, so there is potential for explosive plays here against Indianapolis. At 31 at the top of tier 9, I have Scary Terry. I just do not like him in what will likely be a painful day in the shadow category. Michael Thomas is at 32, looked healthy, looked solid and bounced back. Decent matchup against Carolina. Elijah Moore is at 33. He tied Amari Cooper for team lead in targets in week 1, and he had a nearly 25% target share as well. Deshaun Watson could pull a Brock Purdy in week 2 against his defense, so I like Moore as a decent dice roll. George Pickens is the wide receiver 1 now without DJ there in Pittsburgh. I like him in Cleveland if you are looking for a flex play late. And the last wide receiver that I want to look at is Drake London. To be honest, it's more about highlighting that you should not start him than having him as a viable option. He is purely a desperation play. Jair Alexander, the stud corner, could and probably will shadow him, and the Falcons do not seem too concerned with trying to get him looks anyway, so I would bench him if at all possible. We are almost done here, and I'm going to end the day with my tight ends. Tier 1 is Travis Kelce. He's all alone. It's easy. If he plays for you. Tier 2, we start with Mark Andrews. Make sure you check out that he is going to play, but he is trending in the right direction. At 3, I have Darren Waller against Arizona. He is going to boom this week as long as that hamstring injury does not hold him back. Make sure you check him out in the next couple days as well. But nobody allowed more fantasy points or touchdowns to the position than the Cardinals did in 2022. They also allowed the 3rd most yardage. So if Waller gets his opportunity, he will smoke the Cardinals. The top of tier 3, I have George Kittle against the Rams, and at 5 is Evan Ingram against Kansas City. We love the matchup here. His usage in week 1 was also encouraging. 82% route run per team dropback, and over a 15% target share. Ingram also ranked 6th in receiving grade, 4th in yards per route run. You'll love all of those numbers. He will continue that against Kansas City. They allowed the 10th most yards per reception last year to the position, so we see why Ingram could have a big day. Pat Freiermuth is at the top of tier 4. He's my 6th ranked tight end. He led the team last week with 3 red zone targets. He is clearly Kenny Pickett's go-to option when they are in close. I am buying that touchdown upside against the Browns. At 7, I have Hunter Henry. He is a matchup play who could score again here. He caught 5 of 6 looks against Philly, and the Dolphins gave up the 3rd most points to the position last year and the 4th most in week number 1, so that trend looks like it's continuing. Chigoziem Okonkwo bounces back here, I think, against the Chargers, who let up plenty of yardage through the air last week. Number 9 is David Njoku. He gets Pittsburgh. And at 10, and at the top of tier 5, I have Kyle Pitts. Obviously, this guy is getting held back by Desmond Ridder and that lackluster passing offense, but his numbers were still decent against the Panthers, and he did post 2.2 yards per route run, so that gives us hope. When we look at the Packers and the matchup, Green Bay held down tight ends last year, so I do not expect a monster performance from Pitts. Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta, the rookies, and my tight end 1 status. I think they both have enough usage to hit here for us. In tier number 6, at 13, I have Zach Ertz. Lots of usage for him in week 1. I think the same happens against the Giants. Tyler Higbee gets San Francisco in a tough matchup. I have him at 14. And at 15 is Luke Musgrave against Atlanta. He could take advantage of this Falcons defense. They allowed top 10 numbers, both in receiving yardage and yards per reception, to the tight end position in 2022. I like Musgrave because he had a 15% target share last week, and he also had 85% route participation. That says he's got a great shot to give us some yardage. The 16th and final tight end that I have for us in week 2 is Cole Kmet, and that will do it for my start sits. Hope you guys learned something. If you didn't and I did all that information, then I'm certainly not doing something right. Drop your comments down below. I love to be able to help you guys out. I want to answer your questions, and by talking back and forth, we get better. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed the content. Keep pushing Relentless Press's name out there on our journey to our first 1,000 subscribers. To all of my current subscribers out there, thank you guys so much. You are the best. I look forward to an awesome year together. This is Relentless Press. Go get a big dub in week number 2. I will see you next time.